Okay, let's start with week 7. So I've changed the format here a little bit, but I think it'll make it easier to follow. So if you look in the at the top where I put the sportsbooks odds, and then I'll put the circle around which one I'm taking. And so I think, and then for the ones that we agree, we'll talk to it real quickly and then move on that we can go faster. So looking for Thursday night football, uh, Sportsbook has Arizona favored by 1.5, but the model has has New Orleans winning by somewhere between 8 to 11 points. So this is a significant difference. Arizona is a home team. Oftentimes for Thursday night, there's going to be some favorite for that one. But when I look at the totality of the team, Arizona has not been impressive this year, and New Orleans has shown some pretty good capability. Granted, they've lost some that they should have played better at. They do have a quarterback issue. New Orleans has a quarterback issue. Looks like Jameis Winston is coming back, who's a phenomenal quarterback, but has problems with throwing interceptions. But when he's hot, he's hot. But overall, when you look at the totality of the team, you have to look at the explosiveness of New Orleans down here in the lower right-hand corner, which I think gives a pretty big advantage compared to Arizona, who I think has overall been a pretty lackluster team altogether. For the next game, Cleveland versus Baltimore. Baltimore is favored by 6.5, and that's about what the model has it at. Overall, you have to admit Baltimore is a pretty good team. They've got a really good rushing efficiency. Overall, a solid team up and down the stat line. Meanwhile, Cleveland, they rush really well and they're poor everywhere else. So in this case, not much to analyze here. I'll give you a look at the breakdown charts. And again, these numbers are based upon how these two teams will match up in going against one another. These do not reflect what they've done this year. This takes what they've done and how they match up. That's part of what the algorithm does. And so with that, the algorithm is pretty much supporting what the sportsbook odds makers are saying as well. So not much to see there in that case. Next, let's go to Atlanta versus Cincinnati. Cincinnati is favored by 5.5 points, but the model is saying that it should be a close game with a slight advantage to Atlanta. And so when you have a big difference in the line, such as 5.5 points, and the model is saying that they're about even with a slight advantage to Atlanta, um, that's a case where you have to take the under, in my opinion. I think that's an easy case. And so as I look at this, Atlanta, they've been playing pretty well of late. Their offensive efficiency has been really good. And meanwhile, Cincinnati, uh, they might be coming off of a Super Bowl trip, but their offense has not been performing thus far. We'll see if they can turn that around, but they have had some decent defensive uh, numbers as well. So as we break it down into the quad chart here, um, Atlanta's rush game, I think, is really what makes a difference. And then if you look in the lower left for the number of plays, it just shows a big advantage for Atlanta in that case too, which I expect to see from a team that's going to be a good ball control team and manage that. Next game, Detroit versus Dallas. Sportsbook has Dallas favored 7.5 points, and that's about what I show as well. Uh, we can take a quick look at the numbers here. So again, looking at it here, Dallas has an advantage, certainly an advantage with their rushing game as well. And then when you look down at Detroit, they're not controlling the ball very well. And they're not protecting the quarterback very well. Detroit has had some explosion, but overall the advantage goes to Dallas. Next game, Green Bay versus Washington. Green Bay is favored by 5.5 points. The model says that there is a slight advantage to Green Bay, but not 5.5 points. And considering how poorly Green Bay has been playing this year, it's really hard to take such a large uh, point spread. And then when you start, even though you look at the overall negative values for Washington, um, it's it's undeniable that Green Bay has been really poor as well. And if you look at the upper left, this is one that I find really rather astonishing. In that, if you look at the upper left, there's an advantage for Washington in the pass game. Granted, I believe that Carson Wentz, I think, is injured, but that notwithstanding, I haven't seen a single solid performance from the Packers this year. Uh, Aaron Rodgers has a phenomenal capability to pull that out. But that notwithstanding, until we see it, the numbers aren't going to reflect big wins for them in that case. And then when we look over here on the top right for Washington, we're showing that they've got some explosive capability. And that's going to tend to lower that margin of success. Okay, Indianapolis versus Tennessee. Tennessee is favored by 2.5 points. The model shows a slight advantage for Indianapolis. And so when you look at it, uh, both teams have some strong points and both teams have some weak points. Over when we look at this, the quad chart, you look at Tennessee that they're having a hard time protecting the quarterback. And then when you look down the lower right, uh, Indianapolis has had some explosive capability this year, and I think we certainly saw that in that last game as well. All right, next game, New York versus Jacksonville. Uh, Jacksonville is favored by 3.5 points, and that's I'm showing Jacksonville should be winning by more than that. Uh, I would say that overall, the negatives that we see in the New York Giants in their offensive pass rank and their defensive rush rank really kind of get overwhelmed by the solid play, maybe not great play, but solid play overall by Jacksonville, and they appear to have a really strong defensive game against the rush, and of course the offensive rush is New York's strength, and so when you put that matchup together, it's just showing even more, emphasizing more of a advantage for Jacksonville. Um, and when you look at the quad charts, I would say overall, I see a lot of evenness across the board. It looks as though Jacksonville has a little bit more problems with the fumble and the interceptions. But overall, they seem to be fairly comparable with uh, just overall a slightly stronger running game for Jacksonville. But they're when they match up, they just tend to have a stronger offense overall against uh, an improving New York team, but certainly better than 3.5 points that the sportsbook has. Next, we have Denver versus the New York Jets. Sportsbook has Denver winning by 1.5 points, and that's about what I have them winning at as well. Um, So in this case here, if you're going to take one, New York versus Denver, it's a close game. So whichever one you think is going to win, the fact that they're playing at Denver, that altitude can oftentimes tend to be a nice little advantage for them. But New York is certainly a lot better team than they have been in recent years. Denver, I think, is struggling considering they're a fairly strong team overall, and they've added Russell Wilson, but they don't seem to be performing as though they have a top tier quarterback. Them. Then when I look at the quad charts, again we're calling for a somewhat even game with advantage to Denver, and that's about what the numbers say. All right, next Tampa Bay versus Carolina. Sportsbook has Carolina winning by 10.5, and I have them winning by about that same amount. Um, uh, uh, Overall, and especially with Carolina and their quarterback situation, um, uh, if Tom Brady and Tampa comes out and they play the way that they're capable of, this should be an easy game for Tampa Bay. And the numbers are showing that. And then the subjective values is the injury roster and such is showing similar types of things. So I have no reason to believe that this won't be um, a runaway game. But again, it's football. It's NFL football, and anything can and does happen. All right, Seahawks versus the Chargers. So in this case here, Chargers are favored by 6.5 points. Here we go. Uh, Seattle should have a strong rushing game this week. So if you're a fantasy sports team, sports better, that's one that I would certainly bet on. But then as I look around at some of the other values, that's the difference maker that I see there. I see Seattle controlling the ball more of the game as well. And the one thing I'll say is, as we're showing, if you look at the upper right hand corner for the purple bar, the far right, um, the Chargers have an explosive offense. That's what that purple bar means, is 20-yard plus plays. And you can see that you can see how much more that bar extends up. They've got more outliers going up in that direction. But at the same time, if they're uh, uh, you know not controlling the ball, they're having turnovers. Not that it's saying that they're doing that as much. Certainly, Seattle has their issues with getting sacked and such. But when you have a strong running game, you're able to control the ball in that case. Is it's going to tend to lead towards numbers to do that. So we'll see how Seattle is able to control the ball and how the Chargers respond. Okay, Pittsburgh versus Miami. Um, Miami is favored by 7.5, and the model is saying that it's probably closer than that, with in favor of Miami. But I'm still going to take Miami in this case because they're getting Tua back. Do I think Tua is of the quality of quarterback that, say, uh, uh, um, Josh Allen is, or Tom Brady, or Aaron Rodgers? No, but he's certainly, you can see the effect on that offense for sure. And the fact of the matter is, Pittsburgh is just a very poor team overall. They certainly had some bright spots here and there, but I think you can see the impact if you look at the first 3 games of what Miami's done, and then the last 3 games. I think getting Tua back should be a big shot in the arm for them. This will be a good game to come back again. This is a big point spread. I am showing that it should be closer than that, but it's the return of Tua which is leading me to want to go take that. And so when we break it down by the numbers, I do show that there's an advantage if you look in the lower left, number of plays, so time of possession. That's probably just due to artifacts of the last 3 games and of Miami, and oftentimes poor teams are going to tend to want to run it more and can have more of that ball control. But then when you look and we look at their run pass charts, again, it's showing that they're about equal, a slight advantage in the rushing for Miami. But if you were to look at the first 3 games in the passing, Miami is quite a bit better at that. And then when you look at the upper right, Miami's got a far more explosive, and that's with all the season. And so you can certainly expect that should jump up quite a bit. So that leads to bigger point differentials, which is what I think is going to happen here. So when I look at that difference over here between Miami and Pittsburgh, I think that they're going to win by more than 1.5. Okay, let's go ahead and look at Kansas City versus San Francisco. Sportsbook has KC winning by 3.5. The model, and historically speaking, this is a good time to talk about this. The model, typically speaking, has not favored Kansas City's type of football. It's one of those things that, and again, I think if you're a sports bettor and you look at how the games actually come out, sometimes Kansas City can frustrate you as well. Sometimes they can come out and really just blow a team away, and other times they can struggle, and then come back at the last minute, put up 20 points in the last quarter, and win by 2 points. And that's kind of what the numbers show. In this case here, if you look at San Francisco, they're really solid, and they're very high performing defense, very good efficiency. Kansas City is too. Kansas City is absolutely solid, pretty equal in a lot of areas. When you go through and break it down by the numbers, San Francisco's got a superior rushing game by the numbers, is what we're expecting to see from that. Um, One thing I would point out, both teams have struggles with turnovers, fumbles, or interceptions. Uh, Kansas City is a more explosive team, but I don't think that much more explosive than San Francisco. San Francisco has been protecting the quarterback better. I think they just have a really dominant offensive line as well. In this last game, you did see Jimmy G really struggle with ball control, and that reflects in those numbers, and the fumbles is looks like where those came up at. But also Jimmy G tends to throw interceptions as well. So maintaining control of the ball is always going to be a factor here. But Patrick Mahomes has issues with some of those things as well. I don't think that their offensive line is as solid. So again, it's always difficult to take the opponent of Kansas City in any way, shape, or form. But I think San Francisco is just all around a more physical and capable team. Okay. Texans versus the Raiders. Raiders are favored by 7.5. The model is saying that the Raiders have a more higher probability of winning, but I have a hard time taking them at 7.5 points. Um, this is one where it's difficult to see, exactly how it's going to go. Houston has some bad numbers, absolutely, but again, when you look at the Raiders, putting up big points and winning by big points just hasn't been their theme. You can certainly come and prove me wrong. When I go through and look at them by the numbers here, I see slight advantages for the Raiders in rushing, but a slight advantage for Houston in passing. We'll see how that works out. Looks like fairly equal ball control. The Raiders are having a harder time protecting the quarterback, protecting the ball. The Raiders are a bit more explosive, but not that much more so than Houston. So all in all, it looks like it's an even game. I'm just not sure that 7.5 point advantage for the Raiders is really warranted. All right, and then for the Monday night game, Sportsbook has New England favored by 7.5, and that's about what I have them favored at as well. When you look at some of the efficiency numbers, Chicago for efficiency. So when you look at those rankings at 6 and 7 for offensive rush and pass, I'm looking at yards per attempt. And the reason why that's important is that's what the model is queuing off of, because it's taking the probability of how the success of a play and what type of yards you're going to get. And those two things taken in concert is what's important. And then you use some probability distribution based upon their performance to see how far that's going to be. And so when you have those, when you look at the Chicago Bears, you might be saying, well, how do they have such a good offensive pass rank? They also don't pass a lot. And I don't blame them if you have a good rushing team. But that's why those numbers are there. But then when you look at New England, they're a solid team all the way around. Their defensive rush is maybe a little weak, but overall, a Bill Parcells team, a Bill Belichick team is a well-coached team, and they tend to be very disciplined. And that's where I think some of those numbers on the right for the efficiency show up. And so then when I go look at the stats, again, I see a strong rushing game for the Bears. But I see a strong rushing game for New England as well. Much stronger passing game. I see Chicago having a lot harder times protecting the quarterback, getting sacks, giving up fumbles, interceptions, and a lot more stability overall from New England. Neither team is particularly explosive, but at the same time, um, with a projection of New England expected to pass right around 200 yards, and about half that for uh, Chicago, who's had an anemic passing game this whole year. It's understandable why the model shows such a favor, in addition to the sports book for New England. So that wraps it up for the week. Good luck, everyone, with your picks, and we'll do a wrap up on Monday. Have a good weekend.